Hi, folks, and welcome back to MMA Talking Heads. I'm Jason Probst, along with my co-host Loretta Hunt, and we're here to discuss the two big things this weekend that happened. We had the debut of Tough Live 15, Loretta, and Bellator. So, how are you doing today? First off.
Oh, I'm good. I'm great. Interested in this flourish of MMA we saw on Friday night, and then nothing on Saturday really. The little things around the world, right? Cepho and Crow Cop and Croatia, but nothing really major on Saturday. So it's kind of nice to get the MMA in on a Friday night.
Right, and get it out of the way. Well, we had the debut of season 15 of The Ultimate Fighter with Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz as coaches, and kind of a different format this time. And they started it off with a one-round fight to pare down from 32 guys to 16. What were your thoughts on that? Is this kind of a harbinger of things to come with the 15th season of Tough?
Well, this is a one-off episode. Next week, it's going to go move back to more of the standard Ultimate Fighter that we've seen for the last 7 years on Spike. I talked to Chuck Saffler. He's the president of FX, and he kind of broke it down for me. He said the first half hour will be basically the drama of the house and the training, and then in the second half hour, we'll get to the fight. So it'll look a lot more like our standard Ultimate Fighter. So, we are critiquing something that's kind of a one-off.
Right.
I mean, in general, I was a little alarmed by the one-round fights. I just don't like, I think it really stripped us of some of the vital elements of this sport. And I'm not sure if it was 100% fair to these 32 fighters that were coming in. They only had 2 days notice. They hadn't trained for a one round fight essentially.
Right.
And
Basically,
this
a
kind
street
of,
fight.
yeah, it kind of forced them to go in there and take a lot more chances. And I guess, when we say that out loud, that's a good thing, right?
Well, that's what
And
Dana loves.
yeah, we had 8 finishes out of 16 fights. I can't help but imagine that these guys have been training the rest of their careers to do multi-round fights and adjust to their opponents. And some guys take a little while to get going there in the cage. And I just hope we didn't miss a really good guy that was a slow starter, or his assets lie in adapting to his opponents or coming
Right.
back, or
Right.
like we have the guys that are like that. We can name a whole bunch on the
Right.
top level that are like that. They don't really get cooking until the second or third round.
Right, at the same time though, they had to do something because I think by season 14, even hardcore MMA fans were kind of lukewarm about Tough. I mean, I know I
Yeah.
was, even though I faithfully watched it, because it had kind of become sort of the same mix of some hijinks and some rivalries, maybe whether manufactured or real, to create drama. Here's my question: if they do the half hour of the week's goings on in the house for every 1 hour episode, and then do the other half hour live for the fight, what if the fight ends in one round? What do they do with the rest of the time to fill that time? I mean,
Yeah, they're going to do follow up. They're going to do afterwards. We're actually going, it's a half an hour because after the fight's done, there's going to be more stuff programmed. The biggest thing being they're going to name next week's fight live right there.
okay.
So we'll get to see their real time reactions. I think the format next week will be a lot more friendly, a lot more interesting. And Jason, I understand you saying they needed to do something, but I think they could have done other things and not fussed with the actual structure of what our sport is, which is multi-round fights. Why didn't they just break 8 fights and 8 fights into 2 weeks? You know what I mean? And
Sure.
done 8 live fights, 2 to 3 rounds. I know they do the two rounders with the sudden death if it's a tie.
And two rounders are enough to solve like 75% of most fights.
Yeah, I,
You know
I,
what
I
I
I think
mean?
there's a big difference between 1 round and 2 round
Sure.
fights.
Sure.
Absolutely. And 2 rounds have kind of been around for a long time. The Ultimate Fighter wasn't the first one. I used to go to 2 round fights on the East Coast
Sure.
in the early 2000s all the time. So, it's a little bit more intrinsic of our structure of mixed martial arts. I personally, I guess I'm what you would call a traditionalist. I wasn't really keen on the 1 round fights. Also, I mean, we can totally dive into the way they package this thing. I'll throw something out there that a lot of people have brought up. Why didn't they do commentary for these fights? If they're saying they want to attract all these new people on FX who have never seen MMA before, Can you
Right.
imagine someone tuned in? There's dead silence. First of all, people are going to be like, "Why isn't anyone reacting to the fights
Right.
in this gym or whatever it is?" And second of all, what the heck's happening? You know,
Well, that was yeah, that was the interesting thing is that they sort of had Faber Cruz and White in a very low key commentary role, but it sounded like they were commentating a golf tournament. I mean, it was like three you were mic'd into three guys watching a fight. It wasn't like they knew that they were there to sort of lend their expertise to the viewer's experience. So as a result, there was kind of a weird disconnect. I mean, and I understand it's an organic and ongoing thing, but it would have been kind of cool if they had maybe John Onek there to provide commentary, whatever. Because instead, you kind of heard Faber and Cruz and Dana talking a little bit, and it was very yeah. So I can imagine the first time viewer could have been pretty confused.
I thought it was awkward. I thought it was
Sure.
awkward when John Anik would throw to Dana and Dana would have to throw back to him. It was probably the most unnatural thing I've ever seen Dana White do on camera. And that stuff reads right away. So, and there was just a lot of dead silence, a lot of dead space. I mean, think of yourself as a new fan tuning in, heard about this reality show. Ooh, 16 live fights, rapid fire.
Right.
And then you turn it on and the audience isn't really reacting, and you don't know the fundamentals. I mean, even if they had just come out and said, "Hey, we're in a gym. We can't, this is the Ultimate Fighter gym. It's a closed set." Like just those little clues, the audience would have been like, "Oh, okay, I understand." There isn't going to be a lot of cheering in this one. It's really more about really just concentrating on the fights. And then on top of that, yeah, I don't think the Faber Cruz White commentary really helped. And I agree with you. I think it was a little golf. The only time it got very interesting was when they started making fun of the opponent of the guys in the cage,
Right. That was actually kind
which
of
in and
funny.
itself was. I'm like, okay, now they're putting down the product in front of
Right. No, that
the
was kind of funny.
consumer. So I don't think it was a very good idea. But like I said, we won't have this concern next week. It's not going to go like this next week. It'll be one fight and then
Yeah.
the half hour of tape drama that you're used to.
Do you think we're going to see? I mean, they needed to repackage it and kind of give it a an injection. Are we going to see this kind of the same histrionics and the urinating in people's food or ransacking people's rooms, kind of that stuff? And do you think they're going to build a whole episode around it? Like next week, Loretta's foyer is covered in shaving cream or whatever? Because I thought that was it got really boring. It was funny the first time, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think things got a bit stale at the Ultimate Fighter house, right?
Right,
On Spike TV.
right,
But it'll be interesting. I wonder if FX, if they feel a little bit more highbrow, possibly, maybe they'll come in and tell the fighters, listen, we don't want this type of hijinks. Maybe there's a list of certain things they can and can't do. It all depends on the set of fighters that come in, too. If they're given no direction at all and kind of said, just go for it, then it depends on the crop that you got in there. There's
right,
certain guys that come onto the show knowing if they kind of put up fits and, make bigger asses of themselves, essentially they'll get more attention,
right.
and that's what we were seeing a lot of the last few seasons on Spike TV. The question is FX given them any direction? You're not
Right.
allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And I have an idea, if they have and the first few episodes pump out really boring, I bet you they'll pull back on that and say do whatever you want.
Exactly.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. I like in itself that the 30 minutes we're going to see is like rapidly taped. Like it's happening right now. Yesterday they picked the teams. The guys know what teams they're on as of
Hmm.
yesterday. And then, and now they're preparing for the fight. And they already know who's fighting who for next Friday. So, they've got the next 5 days to prepare for that. And that in itself, I hope it makes it a little more immediate and a little more dramatic. But I'll be honest, there's something to be said for the way Spike did it, where they would shoot it all in 30 to 40 days, and then they would sit in an editing bay for 3 months and weed through all this content and figure out what was the best, most dramatic storylines to play.
No, and that's got. I always kind of wondered about that. That's got to be an enormous job. I mean, you shoot a few weeks of all these guys in this isolated environment, and then have to weave storylines out of it. And that's why I was able to kind of give them a mulligan now and then, maybe a weak plot line, because I mean, they're shooting through tens of thousands of hours of video. But this is a different deal. It's kind of, it's a little bit more of a risk, and I think we saw some of the hazards of risk taking with the first episode. I did like it that they had a lot of fights. I mean, that's always been my thing is the show should be about the fights. I mean, there is some necessary filler and some drama, and I like the training montages, maybe a little, human storylines that are interesting, but it should be about the fight. So I did like that, despite the one round format. So definitely some interesting things, especially with Dominic Cruz and Faber leading into their rubber match. And we wanted to switch gears here and touch on Bellator 60, which was this Friday as well, and a bit of an upset with Joe Warren getting taken out by Pat Curran in what was a brutal third round stoppage to win the featherweight title in Bellator. What were your thoughts on this match?
Well, when Curran got into the cage with Warren, I mean, did you see how much
a lot bigger
Curran? I mean, like
bigger.
Immensely bigger. I'm going to use hyperbole, but I think it was like back to the Japan days,
right.
Like that's our mini version of what it was like, with the David and Goliath fights over in
right.
Japan. So, I mean, to me, it was that dramatic because I have not seen. You haven't seen a fight like that lately,
No, that reminded me of David versus Goliath, the old UFC or Japan days,
I felt like we were back in Jerry Bolander land,
Against Scott Ferozzo.
So to me, I was like, whoa. I mean, Curran looked great. He obviously has footwork. Warren doesn't really have a lot of footwork. I think his strengths are his shots, obviously, and he's pretty fast and he's pretty frenetic. And I think when he attacks and attacks and attacks, he tends to do really well. But Curran did a great job of staying out of the way. And then when they did lock up, the physicality of it, Warren didn't have a chance, man. It seemed inevitable to me. So as soon as he could line Warren up where they were in the stand-up, he lit into him. And, we saw probably one of the worst referee stoppages I've ever seen in my time in the sport. It was pretty unnerving and very upsetting to see.
Yeah, I think there were something about. I mean, it's hard to really quantify what punches landed versus glancing versus miss, but it was about 20 or so shots to Joe Warren's head as he kind of was teetering against the cage and Curran was unloading out on his feet. And
it's such a shame that some referees have to physically see the guys crumble and fall to stop the fight.
They think they're still in boxing.
That's what it was. So, hey, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing, but we're gonna shut it off. Shane. My husband just took the phone.
Nice.
So anyway, I thought the referee stoppage was awful. It's one of those ones where I want to call Joe Warren's camp and make sure he's okay.
Right.
When the next day I'm worried about the guy, or that night I'm worried about the guy, because definitely he went to the hospital. There's no doubt, and he's going to be out for a while. They're just based on the damage he took. When that's my gut test, right? If I feel like I have to call the guys and I'm really concerned about them, then that means it's a really bad stoppage.
Well, plus, and another good rule of thumb for it is when everybody in MMA tweets Warren is leaving the cage now. Like half a dozen people in my Twitter feed, Warren is leaving the cage now. Seems to be okay. But this is kind of the Joe Warren style, though. He got KO'd in his last fight in the first round. I think it was the bantamweight tournament against Alexis Vila, and takes a lot of punishment. Gets earlier, he
definitely goes out on his shield, right? And that's that's a great. That's very appetizing, very appealing for fans. But and I listen, I don't really know that much about Joe Warren in that I don't know, what his weight issues are and all that. I know he's an Olympic candidate. He's going to go back and go back into the Olympic trials system now after this fight, which is probably a good call because he's not going to fight MMA for at least he can't fight MMA for at least a few months.
Right.
So that's good for him, but his body's really super compact. Can he go down another weight class?
Oh yeah,
is that an option for him? I don't even know.
Absolutely. He already is kind of a natural, 135 pounds. I think he competed 130 pounds at Greco, which is, I believe, a same day weigh-in in wrestling. So he could probably make 125 with the day before weigh-in in MMA. It's amazing.
He needs to get down. He's at featherweight right now, right? He needs to get down to band. at
At
least.
least bantamweight, because yeah, I mean Pat Curran looked like a grown man next to a boy. I mean, in that,
Yeah,
those.
it's now that they're all like in the sport, they're all so good. Like all the fighters are so
Right.
innately good. When these size difference things come up, it's really a big deal. I mean, we have Frankie Edgar right now, right?
Sure.
He does not want to go down to 145.
He's gonna have to.
But there's something, yeah, that he's clinging to 155, and he got his rematch, and that's fine. As long as the fans want to see it. And when I heard he got the rematch, I was like, oh, Ben Henderson is so gracious in giving him that rematch,
Ben
right?
Henderson's smart in giving the rematch, because if you think about it, what about that fight is going to be any different? Ben
Yeah, I
Henderson's.
thought Ben Henderson won it clearly.
I thought he won it too.
Yeah,
He won it going
absolutely.
away. Ben Henderson's only going to get better. He took very little damage in that fight.
He was
Edgar
very
took,
confident.
yeah, Edgar took a ton of damage. I mean, yes, Frankie Edgar can pull it off, but I understand precisely why they made that rematch, because they need to get this Frankie Edgar at 145 question resolved now. You don't want Edgar to bounce
I guess
around.
he was super stubborn and said, "No way, I'm not going down to 145." And
Sure.
finally, they said, "Okay, we'll do another rematch, and then you go down to 145." I bet you they made the verbal deal. If you lose, you go down to 145, and
And
he agreed to it. That's
yeah.
what my gut tells me.
Oh, well, that's smart. That
Yeah,
makes good
but
sense.
back to Bellator,
Right.
really quick. When you tuned in, did it feel any different to you than it had? Like this was the first Bellator event since the Viacom purchase, essentially, since it's really started to kick in,
Mm-hmm.
and Viacom has started to put a little money into things. Did you notice anything different? Was the show a little bit tighter? Did it feel a little more mature to you?
I honestly can't say. I do like the Bellator commentary team.
I do.
I love Jimmy Smith. I think he's very good. Both of them are good. I didn't notice much. I mean, Bellator just sort of feels like Bellator. It
What
is
is
what it
that? What does
is.
Bellator feel like to you?
It feels the way USA Tuesday Night Fights used to feel.
Uh-huh.
With the champ Sean O'Grady and Al Albert. I know that's an old reference, but kind of a little bit hypey, kind of like the circus is in town.
Uh-huh.
There's going to be some carnies, some rides, something might happen.
Cotton
Some
candy.
Yeah, candy. Something might not happen. It feels a little bit, not so much like a finished product, but a little bit over the top, but not in a bad way. I mean, I enjoy Bellator, but it just feels a little bit, the way it's lit. It just feels a little bit dark. I don't know. There's just sort of like a dark stage and a bright spot with a couple guys fighting, and now and then something great happens. I mean, Toby Amana's inverted triangle, Eddie Alvarez, Michael Chandler, Joe Warren, Pat Curran. So I like Bellator. It just feels different. What does it feel like to you? It doesn't feel like anything
I felt it.
else.
I felt a little bit more organized to me, and I understand what you're
That's
saying
good.
in terms of dark, right?
Right.
You mean like the wide shots we see? It's the arena's really dark.
Yeah.
Obviously, black is one of the colors. They're black and red, right, of
Right.
the Bellator logo and all that. Their branding. So that kind of, I agree, kind of makes it a dark to begin with. I felt it was slightly more organized. I mean, if we looked at the Ultimate Fighter versus Bellator, right? And I'm only doing this because we got to watch both in the same night within a couple hours of one another. There's something to be said to how organized Bellator was, like in terms of, and I got it's hard to, people are going to say you're
Apples and oranges.
are apples and oranges, Loretta, right? You're doing a reality show versus this, but these were both fight shows. We both saw fights on both these shows.
Right.
So in terms of the packaging, I way preferred the Bellator packaging to the Ultimate Fighter, where we didn't really get commentary. There were dead spots. These one round fights. And they dodged a bullet with those one round fights. If we had had just one really, really, really close fight where the judges, everyone picked their camps, and it was up to the judges to decide this one round fight, and they did, and it was a super close fight, and we had to
Yeah.
lose a guy that was really, really good, where a second round really would have been the fair thing to do. This one round thing would have been a bigger controversy, and I think the reason I'm harping on the one round things is I have this fear in my heart that all the regional promoters all across the United States saw these one round fights on on Friday night
Right.
and are like, we can do these on our regional shows, and it
Right.
starts to get incorporated into our sport, and we intrinsically lose all these little nuances that we have with multi-round fights. So this is why I'm harping on it a little bit more. I'm really fearful that people are going to think this is a great thing to do and a normal thing to do, and won't realize that we're losing a little part of our sport if we do something like this on a
Yeah.
regular basis. But Bellator feels a little more organized to me. Uh, I can see some subtle changes and some tightness. I really like the commentary team. They're different. They're different than any other commentary team out there.
Yes, there.
They focus on different things, and I'll be honest, I can't really verbalize why they are different. I hear it, but I can't. It's almost like their content is a little bit different than any of the other teams out there, and that's really refreshing. I think Jimmy and Sean Wheelock, they work very well off of one another,
Yeah, they do.
and they're not frilly, right? They're not like crazy over the top, pro wrestling voices at times. It's just kind of really basic, but also kind of really intriguing commentary. Sometimes I just think it's kind of interesting, and uh, that I think is one of the high points of Bellator, and I'm sure they're going to hold on to those guys for a while, especially with the move over to Spike. But in terms of how it felt, I mean, I think it just went faster. Like I thought the Ultimate Fighter kind of dragged a little bit. It got a little monotonous, right?
Sure.
So I thought the Bellator was a nice, cleaner package. And I think there's something to be said for that. Obviously, I think more people are going to tune into the FX broadcast. The numbers are going to be different. And we also have to remember, too, MTV2 is in 88 million homes. No, excuse me, 80 million homes, and FX is in 18 million more. So the FX numbers should be a bit higher. Obviously, it's the brand. Everybody knows. People don't know Bellator too much. But I can see like slow and steady wins the race happening over at Bellator for sure, and Viacom owns this company now. This is one of their properties. So you better believe they're going to put everything they have into this. And what it did excite me is that a little bit is that they said they're really going to work on the live fight experience, which I think is like goes to your comment. It's a little too dark and all that. They actually got a new lighting grid. I don't know what they're doing with it, but they got a new lighting grid. They got a new audio system. They're going to start working on bigger venues in some cases, so the audience is bigger. But also just filling the venues wherever they go, because that has been the live audience has been the last thing Bellator thought of. Bjorn's gone in. Bjorn Rudney's going in. He's the Bellator
Yeah.
CEO, and he's really focused on getting the TV deals, all that stuff. I mean, he just did the model a little bit different of a way, and the live fight experience has been very low on their list. So I'm really glad they're going to start to work on that, because I think that transfers into the TV experience big
No,
time.
absolutely. I mean, that's why the UFC, never has to, manufacture excitement, because the crowd is there. They're there in the Roman Coliseum. They know exactly what they're going to get.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us again on MMA Talking Heads. Once again with a recap of the Tough 15 debut on Bellator 60. I'm Jason Probst signing off with Loretta Hunt. Loretta, how can folks get a hold of you if they want to drop you a line or a question?
I'm on Loretta Hunt MMA on Twitter. I'm on Facebook as Loretta Hunt. So, feel free to drop me a line whenever.
All
I
right,
love
folks.
talking to people about MMA. So,
And Loretta probably will answer you. She answers fan input all the time. And you can get a hold of me at twitter.com/JasonPro. Send us any questions or comments you have for the show, and they may be answered on the next episode of MMA Talking Heads.
that would be fun to get some fan.
Absolutely. Send
I
them our
like
way,
that.
folks.
Yeah, send some questions. I love to kind of talk about some different topics
All right.
about anything, right? Anything from the past. I have people all the time, tweeting me about. It's weird. I had someone email me this morning. Is this fighter as cocky as he seems? And like,
Right.
people are really interested in these fighters. I think it's great. So I'd love to get some fan questions for sure.
All right,
Anything.
folks. There you heard it. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
Exactly. Bring it in, baby.
Bring it on. We'll see you next time.
Bye bye.